Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Charles Moses, Dean of the School of Management here at USF, and I am thrilled. This is our Dean's Executive Speaker Series, and I'm thrilled today to be able to welcome our guest, our very special guest, and an old friend of mine, Mr. Bob Pittman. And there's so much to say about Bob. I'm going to talk a little bit about him as we go along, but I'll just say that basically he's the #1 media creative thinker, genius of our generation, and so many things, but I'll just start with the two that I know the most about. First was MTV back in the 80s, which revolutionized the whole music industry, not just in the United States, but globally. And then I'll fast forward to his current role as chairman of iHeartMedia. And I'll just give you a little bit of the headlines on iHeartMedia, if you didn't already know. 850 live broadcast stations in 153 markets across America. #1 audio company in America with over 250 million monthly listeners. I'll say that again, 250 million monthly listeners. Greater reach than any media company in the United States, and leadership across multiple platforms, including live broadcasts, digital radio services, influencers, social branded iconic live music events, podcasts, and the #1 commercial podcast publisher. So wide range of activities, #1 company. Bob's been at it for a long time. He's been widely acknowledged as the #1 media thinker in our world today. And I want to welcome you, Bob. Good to see you.
Wow, those are nice things. I'm going to say
Yeah.
this at my funeral. If you can be available, please.
I'll come and speak. Yeah, absolutely. Bob, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about where we are. You know, week after the election, everybody's kind of on edge. Your company, you've been making some very challenging moves with your company right now to kind of adjust to COVID. Just give us an overview from your perspective of where things are in terms of the broad view, 10,000-foot view of the media industry in 2020 and things you've been doing with iHeart.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think COVID was an interesting wake-up call for us all, in terms of sort of figuring out where people are and what people are worried about and how we are as a society. Our company reaches 91% of Americans every month. So that's both an opportunity, but it's a huge responsibility. And I think in times like this, we have a responsibility to, I hate to say this, put the profit aside, the revenue aside, and say our #1 goal is to serve the community.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those old-fashioned people that I think if you build something people use, enjoy, and value, you'll figure out how to make money on it. But I'm not so cynical to think you can figure out how to make money when you don't serve the public. And I know there are other people who have other ideas and they can point to successes, but mine is always about the consumer first. And I think in COVID, what the consumer needed changed radically. In radio stations, we've often been in times of need, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes. When there's devastation, people turn to us and they expect us to be there. Suddenly the music stations are off music and we're talking about evacuation hurricane plans. Or in the case when we had the big flooding, was it 7 or 8 years ago in Houston? I was listening to one of our stations and they were on the air with people calling in on cell phones, telling them where they were on top of houses, and they were getting boats to go there to pick them up. And that's the kind of thing we do. But in my time, we've never had one that covers the entire country like this pandemic. And so I think that really changed fundamentally what people were looking for from us and what we had to do for them. And so I think we, fundamentally pivoted. And by the way, I'm one of those people that thought, oh, there's no way we could do a work from home company. Suddenly we were a work from home company. We had the on-air personalities doing their shows from home. We had all of our people working from home, and our people really rose to the occasion, figured out how to do it. And so I think from our standpoint, probably the audience has never been more engaged with us, at least nationally. I think we've really had to step up and do something different for them and perform a different service. I'm really pleased with the way people did it. And then we have suffered from this terrible downturn in advertising revenue. I mean, our ad revenue we reported in second quarter was down 50%, better in third quarter, but we had this huge drop and we had to adjust and we had to do terrible things that we don't want to do. We had to stop a lot of our benefits. We had to furlough people. We even had to lay off some people. And, even if it's one person, I think it's one of the most painful things you do as a manager, because what you're really doing is you're depriving someone of their livelihood. And I don't care how successful they may be later. I don't care how easily they can get through it. That moment, that shock is hard. It's traumatic for people. And I hope, we never lose the pain that comes from doing that. So we had to make all those adjustments. So in an interesting way, it was sort of a tale of two cities. From the consumer standpoint, they were never more engaged. They've never been more engaged with us than they are now. But from an economic standpoint, we've had to do stuff that I've had to do a couple of times in my life in big downturns, but never one so quick, so dramatic, and so pervasive as this one. And some with who knows when it ends, really. It's getting better, but the economic downturn is certainly here. Then you
Bob, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
You're in the entertainment business, and you've been in it for a long time. And the line between entertainment and information has gotten blurred over the decades. And we had an election last week, and people are out there. Many people think that the election was rigged, and there's a lot of bad information floating around by people who are entertainment purveyors. And so the question I have for you is, do you think that people in your business, is there a role to play in terms of informing the public about the basic, things that make up what it means to be in a democracy? In other words, is there kind of a public service kind of a aspect of what you're trying to do with iHeart?
Well, yes, and are we doing it? When you reach 91% of Americans, we've got everyone in that tent.
Yeah.
Now they're listening to different stations, different programs, and so our need is, how do you pull it together? We launched during COVID the Black Information Network, which we had in development, because it turns out there's no 24-hour-a-day news service for the Black community. We had actually put it on the shelf during COVID because we said we don't have any money, let's stall it. And Tony Coles, who was heading up development, one of our division presidents, came to me and said, after the murder of George Floyd, he said, Bob, the country needs it. And we launched it. But what's interesting about it, I don't know if you've listened to it, is we're doing news in my way, the way it should be done. I'm so proud of our folks because they're doing information, not opinion. Now, there's a role for opinion, but you need to say, hey, let me give you an opinion over here. By the way, this is not the view of management. This is the view of here's somebody's opinion. But in our news, there shouldn't be a name calling. There shouldn't be information. And it should. And I listen to some of it and I go, wow, I haven't heard journalism like that in so long, of just the ability to stand back and not pass judgment. Not throw your opinion into it, but give people the facts. And I think my view is that the public's a lot smarter than I think most of the media is giving them credit for, in the sense that if you give them enough information, they can make great decisions. They won't make great decisions if they have incomplete information. And sadly, when you need to get a rating, the best way to get a rating is to get people's blood pressure up, get them worked up, get them passionate. When you really want to do a public service, it is do a different model. And with the Black Information Network, we had a different model. We got 8 founding partners came in with us and put up the money for it. And the reason we did it, that, by the way, it's McDonald's, it's Lowe's, it's Bank of America, some great companies. And the reason we did it is because we didn't want the people running BIN to have to chase ratings. Said, I want them to be able to build the most reliable, the most dependable, objective news organization there could be. And if we tell them, and you're going to make your money on ratings, they're going to have to do something we don't want them to do. Would you? And we asked these partners, would you join us in giving this as a gift? And they did. And I'm very proud of it. So I think there are opportunities like that, Charles, that you can do. And I think, during each of these, and there've been, in the past 9 months, so many upheavals, including, as you point out, the election. We've tried to do town halls. We've tried to get discussions going on our air about the issues and trying to bridge some understanding. One of the more interesting ones that happened was Rush Limbaugh and the Breakfast Club, Charlemagne the God, Angela Yee, DJ Envy, did a conversation together right after the killing of George Floyd. They carried it on Rush Limbaugh's show, and Rush was on our hip hop and R&B stations. And in the case of Rush's audience, probably the first time they've ever heard these points of view coming from people like Charlemagne the God, and they had a conversation.
Yeah.
And I just think in this time in our country, we need to have a lot more conversations and a lot less polarization if we're going to get where we need to go. And yes, I do believe all of us in media have a responsibility to help foster that conversation.
Great. Bob, I want to step away from the pressing events and the times to talk a little bit about your history. You grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, son of a preacher, and got started in radio, local radio, and kind of worked your way up and just did so many things. Can you just describe for me your early thinking and as you started your career, what kind of, what motivated you, where you got your breaks, and how your thinking has evolved?
I think breaks and careers are meteors hitting in the head. I have this half serious point of view that plans don't come true. Plans help us reduce anxiety about the future by thinking we have a plan, but things just happen, and you either grab the opportunity or you don't. And I've had so many people I've encountered in my career say, I said, I want you to come do this. And they go, well, I got a plan that I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. And I sort of feel like saying, good luck with that. I ain't going to, something's going to happen to you. It's not going to be that. And I was a kid. I always loved airplanes. I wanted to learn to fly. My parents had no money. So come 15, you can solo when you're 16. I needed a job to pay for flying lessons. And the only job I could find was as a radio announcer on a little radio station in Brookhaven, Mississippi. And that began my media career. And I had no interest in radio. I had interest in learning to fly, and that was a job. But I got very interested in radio. It really captured my imagination. And I went on to have this wonderful career in radio. By the time I was 20 years old, I was programming the NBC radio station Chicago, and they sent me to WNBC, the flagship, when I was 23 in New York. And from there, I went on to start MTV and do some other things. But I think each one of those opportunities, when somebody called me and said, we're starting a cable programming company, will you come over and be the programming guy? And I go, what's cable programming? What's that? And that's where we started MTV.
So it was learning.
What I think it is, it's just somebody throws something at you. Are you willing to take a chance? Are you willing to say, well, why not? Let me see what's going to happen here. And to me, those are the greatest opportunities you have in career, are the ones that come out of nowhere.
Okay, here's a bit of a hardball. I think it's possible in this world today for people to organize their lives, the way they live, and the people that they talk to, and the media that they're influenced by, and never face a contravening idea. Everything can be, people just like me who think the way I do, and I think that's a problem. I mean, you always need to hear, dissenting viewpoints or other ideas, and I think the media plays a role in that. And I'm not saying you do, but I'm just wondering what you think about that. I mean,
I think you're right. I mean, obviously, putting Rush Limbaugh and the Breakfast Club together with a conversation was exactly that, where it's two radically different points of view coming at the same issue. But even if you go into and our entertainment shows, our morning shows, generally they're constructed so there are a couple of people on the show who have different points of view. And I agree with you 100%. To me, our society works when we're willing to listen to an opinion that's not our own. And Charles, you and I have known each other a long time.
Yes.
But I have always thought, I've always been most interested in people who don't think like I do. People who think like I do. I know why they do. When people don't think like I do, my mother used to have this thing. She never would hate anybody and she'd never be upset, but she'd say, I wonder why they want to be that way. That was her comment of saying that person's really a jerk.
Mhm.
But there was a truth in that, which is like, I want to know why you think that way. And I find that if I shout my conclusion at your conclusion, we get nowhere. But if I'll take the time to sit down to you and talk about your assumptions and unpack it and figure out how you arrived at that point of view, then we can have a real conversation. Go, I never thought of that. Oh, now it makes sense why you're there. But by the way, did you think about this back in that assumption? Maybe this is different or this is different. And now we change minds by changing assumptions, not arguing about the conclusions. Because by the time I get to a conclusion and you tell me your conclusion, I say, why is your better than mine? I'm right, you're wrong, and we get
The
nowhere. But
cake
if
has
I'll
been
go,
baked. Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I'll get
Yeah.
back to the assumptions are where decisions and where opinions are changed. And I
Mhm.
think you need real conversations to get to that point.
You mentioned earlier that the advertising dollars are running away from the traditional sources and moving into social media into the game. You're in that game now too. You're in social media. You're getting some of those dollars. Project the future, 15 years from now. Where will the advertising dollars be going?
It's funny, Charles, I've been around a long time. I think there's not so much people running away from traditional to new any more than they always run from traditional to whatever the shiny new thing is. But I think it always winds up being balanced about where's the consumer.
Yeah.
Now, in the case of Facebook and Google, they pioneered a new way to buy advertising with all this data infused targeting, analytics, and attribution that no one in traditional media had. And for 10 years, they were selling that, and everybody in traditional media was saying, you want to buy some spots. Well, I think the smart people, and I hope we're smart, began to develop our own data and analytics and put it to it. So I
Mhm.
think when you say, where's it going to be in 10 or 15 years, I think it's going to be wherever the consumer is.
Yeah.
And where the consumer is where the advertisers will be, because they're trying to talk to those consumers in a way that helps their business.
You do a lot of good works, Bob. Away from your media work, you sit on boards. You've been involved in supporting. I think I heard cancer research and all kinds of stuff like that. Tell me about that work. I mean, is it just from the heart, or is it things you get interested in? Do you read something? Or somebody says, "Hey, Bob, come and join us. Help us with this."
It's both. Look, I'm fortunate enough to have a platform where I can make a difference. And I try and use it wisely, and I try and use it. There are a couple of things that are important to me. I'm a poor kid from Mississippi, so I'm always interested in poverty. I'm interested in figuring out how you give people a chance who are, they don't know anybody, they're not wired in, don't have a network, but they are smart and they have ambition. And so I'm been very involved in the Robin Hood Foundation in New York, which works on a big poverty fighting organization. I'm former chairman, still on the board. And I've also been involved in things that I think helped my career that deserve support. I was on the board for years of the New York City Ballet. And I was on the board because there was a great creative guy, Peter Martins, who ran it. And I thought he deserved support because MTV, if you think about those early music videos, there were a lot of dancing. And a
Yeah.
lot of that dance and choreographers were kept alive by the nonprofit sector of
Hmm.
dance. So
Hmm.
they deserve my support. I was on the board of, and I was a former chairman of the New York Public Theater, where Joe Papp was one of the great legendary creators, blacklisted in the 50s,
Yep.
fought Robert Moses to get free Shakespeare in the park. And I
Yep.
just loved this mission. Did the first racially blind casting where he goes,
Yeah.
oh, that can't have that. How could the mother and father be different races? And he would say, it's acting.
Yeah.
It's acting.
Yeah.
And I just loved what Joe did. And so I think, I've tried and lend my support in areas that I think either directly have benefited me or in areas that I think are very important to society, and including medical research and areas like that.
Uh, uh, Myth or reality? I heard that the tipping point for MTV was when Michael Jackson released Thriller, and the two came together, and you helped him, and he helped you.
Yeah,
Is that true?
well, I will say certainly he was. I would say Michael Jackson was the first true MTV artist. What
Mhm.
you had before Michael Jackson, you had artists to go, I'm going to make a video so I don't have to go appear on some TV show. And then MTV took those and played it, and it sort of looked like that's what it was. Michael
Yeah.
Jackson's the first one that had a vision of himself as this performer. If you remember, before MTV, most music stars were not celebrities. You couldn't recognize them on the street because we didn't have the internet, we didn't have
Mhm.
YouTube,
Yeah.
and the magazines weren't what they were, 10 years later.
Yeah.
And if you went to Madison Square Garden, there were no the big screens anymore. They were just a
Yeah.
little ant on stage. You know what they look like. And one of the first things we found on MTV is the artists would say, "Wow, somebody stopped me on the street and said I saw you on MTV,"
Yeah.
and they became celebrities. Well, Michael Jackson's the first person that leaned into that. He had choreography, he had the looks, he had at the showmanship. And he did two videos, Billie Jean and Beat It. And then he wanted to do Thriller. His record company at the time was CBS Records, now Sony Records. And they had a rule, they only paid for two videos. So they go, forget it, we're not paying for a third video. So Michael Jackson, his folks came to us and said, I want you to pay for a video. Well, we didn't pay for any videos. And as a business proposition, we did not want to start a precedent that we pay for videos.
Oh,
So we worked out this deal with Vestron Video and with Showtime. The three of us put in the money, pulled it together, and paid for a documentary called The Making of Thriller. Mind you, hadn't made Thriller yet. Embedded in the documentary budget was the budget for the video of Thriller.
yeah.
So we were able to figure out how to pay for Thriller and how to do it. And we ran Thriller, and when that hit the air, remember Billie Jean and Beat It, it's sort of like, wow, we've seen this great guy, Michael Jackson, but we hadn't seen a video like Thriller.
Yeah.
And suddenly you combine that with this video that had never seen anything like it before.
And it
And
caught
people
fire.
literally were,
Yeah.
and by the way, this was before on demand. So they
Yeah.
would tune in at a certain time, and we played it every hour.
Mhm.
To I got to see Thriller. They tuned in MTV to see it, and I would say it ushered in a whole new era of creativity for MTV.
An interesting question. We're in the COVID era. You and I talking by Zoom. I don't know about you, but I get zoomed out some days. I do it all day long. Where's the future of live music? I used to like to go to concerts, and is it going to be live music anymore? Or is it going to be all through Zoom?
I think it's going to be live music. And by the way, I will tell you, we've done some great virtual events. We started off this COVID thing with Fox, doing the iHeart radio living room concert with Fox that Elton John hosted and had Alicia Keys open up. And so, yeah, people are getting it here, but boy, do we miss human contact.
Mhm.
And we miss being in a crowd with people. I was watching some TV show last night that had people in a bar and in a club dancing, and I go, God, I can feel that vibe, but it's been so long since I felt it. I think
Yeah.
people are dying to get out and do it, and I think as soon as it's safe, you'll see live music come roaring back. And
Yeah.
I saw no signs of it abating. And I know, if you talk to the Live Nation people, what's interesting is when they canceled all those shows, most people did not ask for the refund.
Yeah.
They just want to hold on to the ticket for when the show is rescheduled, which I think speaks loads about how important live music and concerts are to people.
Great. These are student questions. I've got a bunch of student questions.
Well, those would be the hard ones. So let's hit them.
Will radio be a part of 5G technology? If so, how
Yeah.
will 5G reshape mass media and radio?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know what radio is, unlike most other media, is we're companionship. Our whole job is to keep people company. And we do it by talking to them, playing some music, or we do it by just talking to them. We do it by sports talk or news, but it's companionship. People want to tune in to hear the host. And we used to think it was AM, FM, but we realized that actually they want us everywhere they can get us. We're now, in the case of our radio stations, we're on 250 different platforms, 2,000, 4,000 devices, depends on how you want to count them. And 5G is going to make all those digital devices a lot faster, a lot easier, no latency, be able to put much more multitasking on. So I think it will have an impact, but I think it is another platform for things people already love. And probably, by the way, with that kind of speed, you'll open up things like video games that really require back and forth immediately because they won't have the latency that exists today on wireless.
You've long been a very, 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 a guru at kind of putting together partnership and sponsorships and cross endorsement types of deals that benefit all parties. Where is that going? What's the future of that? I mean, I imagine that it's going to be more and more as we go
Yeah,
forward.
I look, I think sponsors want to get involved with their consumers and potential consumers. And the best way to do it is get involved with something that's important to them. I mean, the most expensive spot you can buy on our radio stations is to have one of our DJs endorse something. And oh, by the way, we don't make them endorse it. So if they don't believe in the product, they're not going to endorse it. So it's actually very believable. And I think when you get sponsorship like of the iHeartRadio Music Festival or some of the Live Nation shows, or any event, Super Bowl, Olympics, it's a halo effect, and it brings sponsors together their uh, with their customers, potential customers. I think it's always a great value. I think that just continues to go.
Give me an idea about the way in which you communicate with your far-flung network of employees. I mean, how do you talk to
Oh
them?
boy,
How often? What's your
yeah.
favorite, channel, medium of communication?
It's really a great question. It's really hard. Unlike most companies, we're actually spread out in 160 cities across the country, and every one of them is important to us. Some of them are big, Los Angeles, New York. Some of them are small, Hattiesburg, Laurel, Mississippi.
Hmm.
Um, but all, but and the question is, how do you get the word out? Well, certainly we use email. I do regular emails out to people. Sometimes we'll do videos. Haven't done a big Zoom with the whole employee base, but I do pieces of it. In the old days, I would try and stop off and visit when I could. Probably going to be a little while before I can do that again, and it's very hard in 160 cities to get to them all. But I think it is. I think it's one of the hardest problems we have, and it's interesting. Employees, they get messages through word of mouth. They get it through the press, often not accurate. So a lot of what I try and do is when I feel that there's something that's non-factual going around the company, I try and hit it head on and talk to people about what it is. But I think we also rely upon a series of managers that, we have a market president in each of those cities, and we depend on that person to provide the leadership and translate what the company is doing to that person. And if there's a need in that market, to make sure we know that at the company headquarters, so that we are responsive to the people working there, and they don't feel like they're ignored, or that great ideas go missed because no one told us about them.
Do you see any changes in the way in which people will access your kind of media in the future? I mean,
Sure, sure.
what are
I
the key
think
themes?
I mean, as I mentioned, we're on all these platforms now, so you can now get us on, telephones. You can, your smartphone. You can get us on computers, but you can also get us on smart TVs. It's turned out to be a real growth area during COVID. You can get us on your video game machine. As I say, we're on over 200, 300 platforms now and growing. And so anywhere, our strategy has been be everywhere our listeners are with the products and services they expect from us. So if they've got a smartphone, they probably expect to find their favorite radio station there. We better be there. If they've
Hmm.
got a video game machine and there are other things there, would they expect to find their favorite station? Probably. We better be there too.
Yeah.
So we have a whole team of people that are constantly working with people in consumer electronics, making sure we're there. In the automobile, where AM, FM is king, there's more connectivity now. So we've got the iHeartRadio app there. We've got our podcast there. We've got things that you can't get on AM, FM are on the cars now
Hmm.
through the connected car, and we're continuing to push that out. And clearly, podcasting has been our fastest growing part of our company. We're the number one podcast publisher, both in audience and in downloads. But in that case, we distribute those podcasts everywhere you get podcasts.
Hmm.
I do a podcast called Math and Magic. I'll give it a plug here for marketing people. And you can find it on Apple. You can find it on the iHeartRadio app. You can find it on Spotify. And anywhere you want to get your podcast, feel free to get it there.
Hmm. This is a question from one of my faculty members. Ask the question: would you say that video killed radio? In other words, is the emergence of video, has it had has it softened the market for radio?
Actually, Actually, it's been the opposite.
Mhm.
And we sort of, all of us that started MTV sort of laugh about it. As
Mhm.
we started, the first song we played was Video Killed the Radio Star. But as it turns out, radio has maintained its reach. About 93% of Americans every week. TV has slipped down into the mid 80s for advertised supported TV. So it's actually been the other way around. The radio has wound up being remarkably resilient at a time that all this other media has fragmented so much and has declined. And I think when people analyze it, they realize the reason radio has been so rock solid is because we provide companionship. And this world of sort of fragmented relationships, distance through, looking at my phone all the time, that people actually crave these human relationships. And we talk to our personalities on air, and the way we approach it is that someone, our personality in the morning, JV on Wild and San Francisco, he's someone's best friend riding in that empty seat next to him in the car every day. Ellen
Mhm.
Kay is somebody's best friend sitting on the counter talking to him while they're brushing their teeth or while they're
Mhm.
dressing or while they're cooking. That it turns out that we're companionship, and it turns out that podcasting was sort of an adjacent business, that it's also still built on companionship. What
Mhm.
we find in podcasting is it's very host driven, that
Mhm.
it's not, the content's important, but the host is critical, and
Mhm.
the loyalty winds up being to the host.
Mhm.
So for us, I think radio has been, of all the media, the most solid of them all, just
Mhm.
quantifiably. And I think when you begin to understand the reasons why, I think it makes perfect sense.
Back in the day, the great newspapers, some of them in New York, elsewhere, used to serialize novels and fiction in their pages, and even in radio, they're famous. The old what was it? What's his name? Um, uh, the day, what was the name of the guy? Citizen Kane, Orson Welles.
Orson Welles,
Yeah, yeah,
Bush,
the old thing,
Mercury Theater,
yeah, the
yes.
theater. You think there's a role for that? I mean, people to serialize novels and dramatic things in going forward. I mean, it kind of.
Sure.
I think the Boston Globe has gotten back into doing that, serializing novels and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the print has moved online, that
Hmm.
people want to read the printed word on an
Yeah.
electronic device. And there are places you can do it. By the way, Audible, also you can listen to books on
Hmm.
tape.
Yeah.
And for us, podcasting there's a lot of that.
Hmm.
That we'll do a run of a show that's got an X number of episodes,
Hmm.
and especially the true crime really lends itself well to that. So
Yeah.
it's sort of you're serializing, and it's actually also going the other way, that some of the stuff we do in podcasts turns out being a TV show or a movie,
Hmm.
and turns out to be the basis for it. But yes, people do love that, and it's been very successful on video as well. And I would say probably it's more podcasting than broadcast radio, because again, on broadcast radio, we're not so much doing programs, we're doing companionship. I'm keeping you company for a while you're doing your gardening or cooking or sitting in the office or driving, and or you've got nothing to do and you're just looking for somebody to attach to, and we're always there for you. I mean, our mission statement for our company is to give everybody in America a friend anytime, anywhere.
Wow, that's a big statement.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, speaking of friends, I think this is another student question. You were recognized as a marketer who changed culture award. The physical stereotypes that influence our implicit biases come from news and marketing. What actions are you taking to shift culture towards one that is more diverse, equitable, and inclusive? How are you holding networks, producers, those who work for you accountable for creating images that are representative of the real world?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think one that we all have a responsibility to. And I would argue we have a responsibility to it just for a good business alone. If we
Mhm.
reach 91% of Americans, that means that we have enormous diversity in our audience base. So I'm going to start with our employees. How can we possibly understand that audience base without without having diversity internally? I mean,
Mhm.
I've had meetings where we're talking about something for the Latino community. I'm saying, who in the room speaks Spanish fluently? Who's of the culture? And if nobody raises their hand, I said, guys, we're guessing. This is terrible.
Mm.
We need to have people at the table. We need to have those voices. We need to have that mosaic as part of the company. So second is that, and by the way, how do you get people there? Because we're not where we want to be, although we've made nice progress. And I think you have to change some things. We've instituted some things in the past. We'd always say people need experience for that job. Well, if I'm going to have people got experience for the job, that means my workforce is going to look like my workforce did work, because that's who had the experience. So we've had to change it and say, instead of some of these jobs are not, we're not going to say you have to have experience. We're going to say we think you have potential.
Yeah.
Now we've opened up the funnel a lot more to look at a lot more candidates. For
Mhm.
all major jobs now, we require they interview at least 2 diversity candidates. So
Mhm.
at least they're looking broader than history would do it and the past would do it. And then when you get on air, I think we've done a very good job there, and putting out a very diverse group of programming. We're number one in hip hop in the country, number one in R&B. We're number one reaching the Hispanic population. We are number one with moms. I mean, so we break it into those segments, and we do look at it, and we're very cognizant of the role models that are on the air, and we try and have span the grouping. And I'll do with the Breakfast Club, which is an ensemble show, but very much representative of. You've got 3 different kinds of personalities on the show: Angela Yee, DJ Envy, and Charlemagne the God. And I think even within this hip hop world, there's a diversity of opinions, positions, role models, and we provide a range of it in that one show. And I think on shows like Ryan Seacrest, he's on a morning show in Los Angeles, huge Latino population, and a couple of the main members of the Ryan Seacrest show are of the community, so that they bring that into the show on an ongoing basis, and again provide a role model for it. And we have people like Maxwell on C100
Mhm.
in New York that represents, although it's a pop station, he's of the Black community, and he
Mhm.
brings another perspective to it, and again provides that kind of range that I think we need. And so for us, it's very important. And we've got Enrique Santos is the head of iHeart, Chief Creative Officer of iHeart Latino. Also does a Spanish language morning show in Miami, number one. But he also does a Latino focused show in English on our pop stations across the country every Saturday,
Mhm.
so that we're able to put these voices in new places. So it's not, I just don't hear about it on a station specifically targeted to it, but I hear it on broader interest stations as well, which I
Mhm.
think is critical to supporting our society. And what's made this country so great, as I think this question points out, is this incredible diversity that we need to fix some of the problems we have, and getting as diverse and as respectful of the diversity as we have, and make sure everybody's got the same opportunities.
Yeah, I like the trend towards less homogeneity. Spread it out. Everybody, be yourself. Bring your original self to the table. There's a value. There's a marketplace there. It has a value. If you were starting out now in 2020 and looking back, where would you go? What would you do? Where would you start?
I go in I
Locally.
go into biotech. I think whatever we've done in technology and media over the past 30 or 40 years, I think that kind of excitement and breakthroughs are going to be coming in the world of medicine, and that area of excitement. So everybody young, I'm going is go quick, go get your PhD in
Some science
cellular
related. Yeah.
biology or something,
Yeah.
because I think that's where we're headed. And
Mhm.
I think we're going to make the biggest advancements there. Look, I think tech and media are wildly exciting, and I don't want to, shortchange them, but I do think, open your mind broadly to the world, and see where else might be some interesting opportunities.
Yeah, but Bob, a lot of your success comes from combination of and heart, brains and heart. Um, so, what role does data play in your thinking as you've matured and come along as an entrepreneur and a businessman?
I have a podcast I mentioned called Math and Magic,
Hmm.
and my whole way I run my business is it's the combination of math and magic. Math are the analytics. I need to know what's going on, and I don't need it because I read about it in the newspaper. My next door neighbor told me I need some quantifiable examination about where people are, what they're thinking, what they're doing, how they're behaving. But once I find that, that doesn't tell me how to motivate them. It doesn't
No.
tell me how to build a business around it. That's the magic. That's the
Yeah.
creativity.
Mhm.
And I think every great successful business, every great successful ad campaign, programmer, it's all the combination of math and magic. And I think, if anything, I fear a little bit that we think that data's everything now. And
Mhm.
it's only a piece of the puzzle. Okay, I can find everything about this person, and then I serve them one line in a search ad. That's supposed to motivate them the same as if I've got Elvis Duran or Ryan Seacrest saying, "Wow, have you tasted these new cookies? They're unbelievable. Let me tell you about them, where to get them." Now I've brought you into it. Or, by the way, we talked about sponsorship, or I've got the sponsorship opportunity to really embed it into something that's important to people. You need both of them. And I
Yeah.
think, the pendulum always swings. And I think it's swung really far to the math side. And
Yeah.
I think people have sort of forgotten about the magic a bit. I sense it's coming back, but it's not one or the other. It's the combination of the two, and they work together.
Yeah.
And I
We
think
have
the
better
best
math than
people,
we used to too.
yeah, we have a lot better math, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and a lot of stuff we had to guess at we don't anymore. But somebody told me really early, because I was a research guy back in the days before we called it data and analytics. And when I first started out, I majored in sociology in college, never finished college. Sorry about that. But I spent a lot of time on in social methods. And somebody explained to me, I said, Bob, research is not policy making. It's answering some questions. Eventually, every decision you make is a gut decision. But the question is your gut conditioned by 10 friends telling you something, or is it conditioned by some great research you just looked at? But at the end, you're going to make that decision. And there's a fellow named Marshall Cohen who started out, did the original concept test of MTV at an outside firm. And then we
Mm.
hired him on the inside. And for years, he was the head of research at MTV and was with me at AOL. And Marshall and I worked together many, many years, and we looked at the same pieces of research and argued and fought about every one of them. So what
Yeah.
does that mean?
Yeah.
And we had all sorts of theses and hypotheses. So even when we think we know, it's still a lot of magic, and there's a lot of intuition, and it's a lot of it. And some people have a feel for it, and they should use that feel for it. It'll make it very valuable.
Great. Bob, we've been at it for 45 minutes. I'm going to ask you one more question on behalf of one of my students. And it's a really important question. And I hope this student will follow up with me. And if you say yeah, then he will follow up with you. This student
Okay.
is working on a project to start a version of MTV that would combine with a PBS type of a model, public broadcasting and MTV. I don't know what it is. I haven't met the student. Um, and this student would like to know, he or she would like to know, and I'm going to ask on their behalf, if you would be willing to have one of yourself or one of your people to take a look at this project once it is matured. I'll vet it first and just give them some feedback.
Sure. I tell you what,
Absolutely.
you send it to me after you've vetted it, and I'll have someone take a look at it. Hard look at it.
Great.
I'm
I'll
probably
take.
too old to be the greatest judge of stuff. I'm not sure you want a 66-year-old man
Yeah.
opining on hip new businesses, but I'm
Yeah.
delighted to help.
Yeah, we have great students. They're doing a range of things in a range of places. We love our students, and so this student asked me if I would ask you. So on their behalf,
I'm
I'm asking
delighted
you.
to. I'm
Great, great.
delighted to.
Bob, I just want to thank you so much for your time. We know you're very busy running your company and doing all the things that you do. We really appreciate it. Very informative, and we hope one day you can come back to us and another guys as you move along in life. That maybe you'll stay close to us. We want to stay close to you, and thank you so much. I really
Well,
appreciate it.
listen, I really appreciate it, and I appreciate what you're doing, because I think that we need, and everybody that's watching today who's a student, we need new, fresh ideas. And we need people with new, fresh ideas to have access to people who can help them do something about it.
Yep.
And the world is dependent on both for society and for media and entertainment all the way through. And I thank you for the work that all of you do in building that capability and building that bridge of people who have ideas and building the bridge to companies that need them and helping them develop the skills they need to turn those ideas into reality. So hats off to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. Deeply appreciate it. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.